I think my dad gave me the best feedback on this. And he said, look, like, you're not going to get your next job by mailing your resume out. You're going to get it because you worked with someone before who wants to work with you again. So, like, do the thing that you want to do, build the story that you want to build. And, like, I think that just being in that spot where you genuinely enjoy the work, and it's not every day, like, you're going to have good days and bad days, but being in a spot where you're excited about the work, you're excited about why you're doing it, you're excited about the people you're doing it with. One of those pieces will fall off the bus, you'll pick it back up later, you'll keep plowing through it. I think that's one of the most important things.
Welcome to the Unleashing Leaders podcast, where we work with willing leaders to accelerate the changes you seek. We'll learn from the experiences of different leaders facing real challenges and distill practical, purposeful steps to apply in your context. I'm Lee Scott, your curious co-pilot. Together, let's make positive changes for our companies and communities. Welcome back to the Unleashing Leaders podcast. Today, we are bringing a really talented guest, somebody I have gotten the privilege of being able to work side by side on a couple of mega accounts. We're talking like 9-figure accounts here, and immediately impressed me with the way that she thinks and the way she approaches problems with customers. We are joined by Anna Basevich. She is the Senior Vice President of National Accounts at Arcadia. They are a digital health product company. She's going to tell us more about the amazing things that they're doing, really integrating, empowering more effective healthcare solutions and others. She's based out of Boston, Massachusetts. And today, we're going to zoom into that moment when you're implementing all these cool new tools, whatever it happens to be, right? And with AI, we're all going to be experiencing a lot more of that as we're trying to integrate technologies and datas and workflow optimizations to our workforce to really unlock their skills. But how do you help people bridge that gap? How do you help your customers get the most out of whatever that data or technical solution is? And she is amazing at it. She's learned a lot of things about it along the way. And we've worked on some together, right? So you guys are really going to appreciate the example she gets to share. So Anna, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lee. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, it's been a long time in coming, my friend. You're a very busy lady. Yes, we do keep our hands full. So start by give us a little bit of a glimpse of what you're doing now, and then we'll go in the Wayback Machine and talk about how you got here. But just tell us a little bit more about, what's your current role? What are you doing for clients these days, and why does that matter?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. So I oversee our national accounts at Arcadia. That's our largest partnerships. And I'll zoom up a little bit and give just a sentence or two of background on our company. Arcadia works with healthcare organizations across the landscape to help them use data really effectively in order to improve the quality of care and their financial performance. So we work with health systems, we work with health plans, we work with state and local government agencies. And the thread that we've got in common across all of those is that when you or I think about where our healthcare data lives, it's in so many places. And our health plan knows what they paid for. Our primary care physician knows what they typed in. The cardiologist knows what they typed in. The behavioral health specialist may have typed something in somewhere. Lord only knows who's going to find out about that. If we are on Medicaid coverage, whether that's Medi-Cal in California or something in any other state, the folks actually paying the bills at the end of the day may or may not have an awful lot of visibility into the type of care that we're getting, whether it's truly high value, whether there are interventions that are necessary. And Arcadia helps organizations pull all that data together into something that allows them to understand what's happening on a population level and what folks can do on a day-to-day basis to move the ball forward.
Yeah, and then all of that leads to helping to make sure that people are getting access to the right care when they need it, that that your most vulnerable populations are getting more of the attention that they need, all of those wonderful health outcomes. And Anna, I know you guys have been doing this for a while, but I mean, I just got back from a 3-day AI conference in Sun Valley, and one of the big things that we were talking about there is, hey, AI is going to do all this stuff, and I'm like, AI is only as good as the data you feed it. Otherwise, it's GeiCo, right? And so you guys have been figuring out ways to be able to, provide the visibility to inform that decision making, dealing with really heavily regulated data. You've got HIPAA and privacy rules. There's state level, there's federal level, there's the individual companies themselves. And so, this, like you said, it's all fractured, and it's protected, and it's got different, boxes that it lives in. So this, I mean, while we're talking about healthcare in Arcadia in particular here, I want our listeners to know that, like, don't tune out, be like, oh, well, that doesn't apply to me. It's like anybody that's dealing with data, which, by the way, everybody, and you're dealing with it in a fractured fashion, which, by the way, is everybody, and you're looking for ways to integrate, understand, and use that and clean up the quality of that, which, by the way, is everybody. The examples you're going to share are going to be really relevant here. Uh, so thank you for that, Anna. So tell us. So let's jump in the Wayback Machine. And what was your early career experience with recognizing that there was something about leadership or about the way things got done that you recognized? Maybe it was in somebody else. Maybe you did something. What was the spark that got you excited and to lean in the way that you do? Because you work audiences and a great blend of critical thinking and really engaging storytelling. And so when did that seed start to germinate for you?
I think I was lucky early in my career to work with a lot of fantastic mentors and very transparently with some managers that didn't inspire me quite as much. And I think for me, as I was coming up in consulting and I was, working on projects where it was very routine to get something thrown at you at 6 p.m. that was critical, for end of day, however on earth one starts to define that at a certain point, or like you and the office are starting to smell a little bit alike. Um, it really stood out to me that there were managers who could talk you through a story arc for the project, and you could really feel that you were contributing to something and you were part of a storyline that you could be really excited about. And it was like, oh man, like I'm gonna look back and be really proud of this. They were the
They
places.
made it relevant. They made it meaningful. Like, it wasn't just, check this box. It was, this is contributing to something greater, or this is how what you have we're dependent on for the next thing.
And it was something for me. One of my mentors, Michael, our CEO, was running sales. And I remember when he presented company meetings, there was a story that he was telling about the market, about where it was going, about how the curve was bending, how we were playing a part in it, and what it meant for our company. And you could really look forward and say, oh, wow, that's really cool. Because that means that, like, in 2 or 3 years, I'm going to have opportunities like this. We're going to be on the front page of that. And it always stood out to me because then I'd listen to someone else rattle off the deals that they had, and it would be like, well, this health system and this health system, and I've had 3 meetings and 7 meetings, and it was like, okay, okay, well, I don't.
There's a pattern here, right? Yeah.
But for me, I've always been excited about being able to look a couple steps ahead. I think it's so valuable for teams to come together and bond around a particular direction and get excited about it. I think that that's one of the biggest factors that I see when these cross-functional teams come together. Folks are speaking a different language, they don't know each other. If you can get excited about the same thing, you're probably going to work really well together. If you're just trying to burn down the to-do list, you're just going to get tired and burn out a lot faster. So that's been one of the big focuses for me, has always been getting folks pumped about something and then making sure that we're driving towards those outcomes, that we're not just getting something implemented and checking a box, but that the tools that we're putting in place are ultimately something that our customers can really run with and succeed.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And like you said, seeing the bigger story, seeing your role in that story, and then, hey, how do we drive towards those outcomes? Now that was your early career, and that was at Arcadia, I think, initially, right? But then, tell us a little about the journey took a twist, and then you boomeranged. So, it's not like, well, I found the perfect job right out of school, and I just grew up with the CEO, and now I'm his right hand person, and it's all great. Like, it took a few bends to make that all work. What was the major bend, and what did you learn from that, and how did you end up back at Arcadia again?
It's never a straight line, is it? And that's
Well,
I think
well,
what
going
makes
forward, it does. But when you look back, you're like, that was exactly the sequence of actions that needed to prepare me for this. But going forward, it is a jagged knife.
it's so true. So I'd been at my company. I think we grew from probably 40 to 100, people, and it was rough. We'd started doing similar consulting work and had realized that there was really a future for us in technology, and it started curving into a product company, and it was really hard. We had turnover, we had leadership turnover, we had new customers, new expectations, and I didn't feel at the ripe age of, my late 20s or something, like I really knew where I was going. So a mentor of mine had been working at a large consulting company. She said, "Hey, we are doing a lot of cool, hard stuff. Come over and work with us." So I made the jump.
I
And
just want to pause. I want to interrupt your flow. So but notice the trigger there. Cool, hard stuff. That's the draw of the leaders. We run into the fire. I mean, I guess you said cool. I guess that wouldn't be hot. But like things that are hard, things that are challenging, things that are intellectually stimulating, that's what draws the talent. So, anyways, please keep going with that.
so I landed at a large consulting company, and I spent a lot of time locked in air conditioned basements and whatever else. Um,
I spent a little something in Boston in one of those firms. I know exactly what you're talking about, Like,
lots of slides were made, lots of MS project plans were built. The slides had very small font. We were extremely proud of how small the font got, or
yeah,
something to
yeah.
that
How
extent.
many words per slide can we cram in? Because that's what we build per word and per slide. You know.
Yep, pretty much. We in all seriousness, we did good work, and it's funny because I think now looking back on it, I can actually appreciate it a little bit more. But it didn't feel like a place where, it felt like a place where I could climb the ladder and I could check the 500 boxes every year, and one day I'd be a partner, and that was probably exciting, except then I'd be the lowest level of partner, and then, many more boxes later, something would continue in the right direction. But it wasn't something that I was really excited about. And the oddest thing was that every time that I would like see a cool deck or see someone run a meeting a certain way, I would be like, "Oh man, that's what we should do in Arcadia."
Yeah.
And
So there was that inner voice calling you, like you needed that experience. There,
mhm,
I don't know if you're willing to share it now, but there was a moment when you realized that wasn't the right place for you. Do you know what I'm referring to here? You told me this a long time ago. I remember this stuff. Like, what was that thing that let you know, like, while you're getting exactly the experience you need, maybe it's starting to be time for you to look elsewhere?
it was a big team. We were working long hours. We were getting close and friendly, and like it was good. It was a good environment all in all, but it was pretty buttoned up. And I don't know what the heck it was that I said. It was one of those, like, it was 8 p.m. We were locked in there, and I made some offhand, more colorful comment. And somebody on the team looked at me and she goes, "Oh my God, you have so much spunk." And it was this weird mix of like appreciation, confusion. Like, she probably could have been looking at an alien and she might have said something sort of similar. And it was a little bit of a like, yeah, I'd rather be in a place where like you don't look at me like I've got two heads though.
Yeah, yeah. Because well, you mentioned it earlier. When you're working in a team environment, energy is the fuel that drives it, and so that spunk is the spark for that energy. But other folks are just like, well, that's just kind of weird, and you're like, well, I think it's kind of essential. So maybe I need to be someplace that sees that as essential, not weird.
Exactly.
Great,
Uh,
great. So you made
I,
your way back, and you brought your spunk and your newfound experience, being able to really dial in the implementation, and then your journey continued from there.
exactly. I came back to Arcadia. In a lot of ways, I think of my consulting year as my year abroad. I don't think I don't think sabbatical is accurate in any.
No, that one implies some sort of restfulness or restoration, more like a gauntlet, right? Maybe that's what it was. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. But it was a real push to level up in terms of polish, in terms of presentation. I spent a good deal of time with presentation coaches there, and it was such a valuable experience in terms of thinking through how I present, how I connect with audiences, in a way that I was really excited about. And I came back to Arcadia. That was 10, 12 years ago. I think my cumulative Arcadia career is now old enough to smoke, not old enough to drink, which is not terribly common in tech anymore. But I'm really lucky that I've had the opportunity to grow with the company and be part of the change and transformation.
That is great. That is great. Well, one more example to our listeners, that yeah, leadership is not a ladder. It's a mesh, and being able to zig and zag along the way helps you collect the merit badges you need to get where you want to go. And sometimes it's right back where you started, but to your point, you wouldn't have appreciated, you wouldn't have the skills that you needed. It all makes sense looking back. So let's zoom in. You have probably, you're like Wonder Woman, right? She's got like 8 superpowers, right? That's why she's called Wonder Woman. Let's zoom in on one of your superpowers, and that is that ability to just to be a consummate learner yourself, right? Like you're good at helping other people learn, you're good at helping other people level up. And so when you're working on, in some of those larger implementations and you're at that point where you're trying to help the customers be able to unleash the power of whatever fancy new tool they've got, there was kind of a way you were doing it initially, and there was some things you learned from that. So could you dive into that superpower and how that evolved over the time for you?
I spent a good deal of time running around the country training folks on our product. And that wasn't something that I'd gotten any real like formal education or training around how to train people. But I liked talking about the product and people seemed to get excited when I did. So it was like, all right, well, like let's ship it out to Wisconsin, Phoenix, and whatever else. Great. And I would chug a whole lot of coffee in the morning and I'd get up in front of the room and I would take folks through this, grand suite of functionality with report after report after report. And, we'd be walking around, folks would be following along, we'd see that, we'd, pause and pull folks aside, take feedback along the way. They'd be like, oh, it's great. We're learning so much.
Yeah.
Um,
The,
and
and
for months and
it was use
months.
case driven and it was all relevant. And they're like, wow, this is the best training ever, right? Yeah. Yeah. Right now, people are listening, going like, they're saying it like there's something wrong. Like we're like right now, we'd love to get to that level. And we're like, okay, and it's true. Getting to that level is not easy. I mean, we're kind of making it sound easy, but being a masterful trainer that can engage an audience in 8 hours of training in a day or over multiple days, that is a rare skill. And that requires incredible preparation and attentiveness to them to get them through that day. And it is, but it's powerful. And when you're flying around the country and you only get 2 days with Anna, you got to kind of hit it when it's there, right? So, get what you can. So then, yeah, what the heck's wrong with that? That sounds pretty awesome, actually.
I found that pretty often after what felt like a really good training, the folks that were there would hit me up a couple of weeks later and they'd say, hey, I was in a meeting and someone said that we should do this thing. Do you guys do that? And I would just scratch my head like, well, of course we do. Remember, we covered that in section 7. It would have been right around 4 p.m. in the middle of our 10-hour marathon. You were clicking right along.
Yeah, and remember you sailed right through it and you said this would be so helpful.
Mhm. And it almost took me a while to realize that we were cramming so much stuff down people's throats that it wasn't a good way for anyone to absorb information. And I found myself thinking back to high school SAT prep. I'm an ESL kid, and I had the 5 vocab words a day books. And even those 5 words a day didn't all stick all the time. And it was a good recognition of like, well, maybe we need to chunk this out. Like, I've been so focused on getting out there and like brain dumping so much on people in a limited amount of time and then getting out of their hair. So I can move on to the next one and they can go
That's
off and
just it. It seems so efficient, right? You're like, I have taken a year of learning and I have distilled it down into this incredible thing. And now I'm going to just take this concentrated dose. I'm going to inject it into your brain and then look at how much time you've saved, right? And oh my gosh, God knows I've spent years doing that too, my friend. And some of it does stick and people are appreciative and it is better than the alternative where you go to training and you don't get anything, right? But you're right. It just doesn't recognize the need for that recursive, iterative, digestible, bite-sized things. That's like trying to eat a meal for an entire year and then say, I'm good. Like that's just not going to work. So tell me about some of the things you've now since incorporated that revelation that have really helped meet people where they're at and actually allow them to get more of the value out of the tools that they're acquiring and implementing.
I think we had 2 things going for us around the same time that helped us pivot on it. One was that we were hiring a lot. We were growing rapidly. It was great. We had an acquisition coming up where we would be bringing a few dozen people onto the team. And we knew that we had to scale the way we do internal training because if nothing else, I couldn't spend that much time and the couple of other folks couldn't spend that much time training our new hires. And COVID hit, and I was explicitly told that I was not allowed to fly anywhere anymore, and nobody wanted me hopping from hospital to hospital bringing Lord knows what along with me.
Right. It's super spreader comes to mind. I don't know, whatever. And like, but a super spreader of knowledge and wisdom and confidence, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it'll bring something along with it. Who knows? Um, that mystery aside, so we started thinking, okay, well, how do we break this out? And the idea of sitting on a Zoom with someone for 8 hours was so bad that it was like, no, 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 no. We have to break it out. We have to start thinking about this as, hey, we can do 2 hours every morning. We can do Tuesdays and Thursdays. Like, how do we chunk this up? And that really allowed us to take a step back and say, well, how are we training folks on this anyway? Are we just brain dumping the information that we think they need? Or are we actually taking a step back and explaining what this stuff is intended for, why we architected things a certain way, what that enables them to do, and then giving folks a break to noodle on it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was so valuable for me to actually start spending time with customers because taking that approach of saying, "Hey, how do we chunk out a project plan into pieces?" allowed them to think about, well, how do we want to use it really? Who are the folks that we want to bring in? And they suddenly started saying, okay, well, what about a user like Sally? What part, like, is she gonna like come in every other session or what? And we started really getting a lot more focused around users, a lot more focused about doing a really strong foundation. And the other piece is that we recognize that there's different learning styles, that there's a lot to be said for independent learning. So we got a learning management system in place. We got interactive quizzes that we've built in, short videos. Some of them were me talking for an hour and then someone going through and slicing it into separate files. But even in those cases, it was really interesting how much easier it was. And even internally, when we'd start using that, I started finding that like on a nice summer day, I would throw a training in my earbuds and I'd go for a walk for half an hour and then I'd take a break and do something else and then come back to it later. And it was a really nice way to actually be able to digest the information and think about it and come back with something good.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I just want to pause here. I know we're talking about a particular product and set of services that Arcadia provides, which we ended up applying that on the project we were working on, right? We ended up breaking it down. We had a data literacy foundation, and then we had these modules, and then we sit with them side by side at their desk. So, we ended up implementing all those types of things. But I just, for our listeners, where you're like, well, I'm not implementing a new EHR, electronic health records, or I'm not implementing a new ERP, or I'm not implementing a CRM. Like that's all been like, look, it doesn't, even if you're the manager of a squad of 20 people, right? And you're being allowed and asked to start leveraging some AI tools to be able to look at your workload different. Same thing here. It's like, well, I could send it to a 2-week boot camp, right? To learn everything there is about AI, right? And, or have them, hire a trainer or a consultant to come in for a day and teach us everything. And then say, all right, great. Now you got the tools, go get them, right? Versus saying like, hey, we need to identify, in small chunks, what are the types of learning that we need? What are the core competencies that we need? What are the specific use cases we want to apply those to? And then do that iteratively, right? And that allows us like, okay, well, we're going to take a small bite of the apple on this. We're gonna implement that. We're gonna marinate on that, learn from it, and then we're gonna do the next piece, and then the next piece, and then the next piece. And that small drip, steady dose not only is more digestible, but also especially in a world like AI, where you're like, I don't have a set of predefined requirements that led to me buying this product. Like it's kind of open ended, and the data intelligence tools that you guys have, it's like, yeah, there's some base cases that are out of the box, but it really is to empower creative thinking. And they don't even know what their requirements are before they get it. So you're trying to train them on things they don't even know how they're going to use it, and just doing it in that more iterative fashion, I think is what you're saying is a key part to both their digestion and the innovation that can come from it. So I think that's just, again, very broadly applicable to a lot of people out there today.
I love the AI connection there, Lee, because as you're talking, I'm thinking about the way that we've been rolling out AI internally. And for most of our roles, we're not doing any very specific directed training. And we're not telling folks, hey, it's your job to open up ChatGPT at 9 a.m. and do these things, etc. We put it out there. We let folks play with it. And what we started doing is a bunch of lunch and learns and knowledge shares. We've got a new AI tool that we're rolling out right now, and there's a couple dozen of us in a pilot program. And we've got a Slack channel where folks are just dropping, hey, I made this really cool thing. I I was really pumped that I used it in PowerPoint and it made, this neat little infographic within a couple minutes instead of me spending like 2 hours aligning boxes like my entry level
Oh,
analyst
come
days.
on. Remember those days? Those were so fun, right? And you could never quite get the pixels to line up, right?
I had to tell you, man, Claude's better at it than I was. It's fantastic. But there's, and there's so much opportunity there for that organic knowledge share for folks to hear how their peers are really using it and why it's valuable for them. And that was one thing that I always found when I was out at health systems in particular is like when 25-year-old me starts telling a provider how to do their job, I'm kind of up a creek. But when a provider gets really excited because he had that one example where he met with the patient and the patient said up and down everything was fine. And then he skimmed the printout from Arcadia and saw that the patient had had a cardiac event that he neglected to mention.
Oh, yeah, about that.
And the provider realizes, I got to do medication reconciliation. I got to make sure that you've got the right upcoming appointments buttoned up. I want to make sure you're doing follow ups here and there. That man came out of that exam room waving an Arcadia printout, yelling, this saved this patient's life. And there was nothing I could have done if I had lived at that community center for a year that added as much value as
There
that
had to
one.
have been a PowerPoint you could have put together that would have done that. I'm sure there is if you just try.
I'd like to think so, but
No, it's just real. It's real. It's a little organic. No, that doesn't mean it's not structured, right? I mean, there's still a deliberate approach. And you talked about this T-shaped approach, and I think that's a good way for other leaders. Maybe not at the scale and magnitude that on some of the things you and I are working on, but even in smaller things. Tell us more about that T-shaped approach where you provide the broad and then the deep dive. Could you elaborate on that, Anna?
I've always struggled a little bit with the generalist versus specialist division, and it feels in many career guides or whatever that there's this dichotomy of, you can be a sort of universal person who's an operator or a seller, and if you sold Kleenex boxes before, and now you're going to sell healthcare software, and the next year you're going to sell bananas or whatever it is, that you could be a total generalist or that you needed to sort of really, really zero in and get to know one specific thing really well. And I've always found so much value in blending the two a little bit. And this has come up a good deal on the project that you and I cross paths on, where it was so important. At a certain point, there were 4 or 5 of us sort of pulling this together, really getting it planned out. And each of us came in with our own backgrounds, our own part of this that we knew something about. But one of the first things we did was make sure that we were really cross learning. And there was a funny spot where I was on with one of our shared friends late one evening on the phone, and we were thinking about this like 160-page requirements book. Kind of dawned on us at first. I was like, okay, you read parts 1 through 7, I'll take 8 through 15. And the more we talked through it, it was like, no, you know what? We should all know this inside and out. We are each getting a hard copy, printed and bound. We're going through this thing with our highlighters, taking notes, and then all our teams are going to do readouts to each other about how we're interpreting these requirements and how we're understanding them. Because if everyone just knows their part, then you're going to implement 5 or 6 or 20 pillars
Frankenstein. Yeah.
without a capstone that actually brings it together. How do you know that you're moving in the right direction if you're not understanding the work of the person next to you, and ideally a little bit less, but the one next to them, and you're able to tie those pieces together and say,
The pushback, though, is a lot of people say, well, I don't have time for that, right? I just got to do my part. I just got to get it done. It's like, well, if you don't have time, and again, we're not saying be an expert in everything, but be aware of those things. Be looking for the interdependencies. We just facilitated a huge multi-vendor meeting just 2 days ago. And the same thing, it was like and these are vendors that had worked, it was a cross vendor, same thing like you're talking about. They'd work together, adjacent and on different things, but, because, well, you have your part and I have my part. So we got them all together in a couple-hour meeting. It was like we were elevating dependencies and connections and innovations and opportunities that people were like, why haven't we done this before? And so, and to your point, yes, it does take time for you guys to commit to, getting the printed, going through it. But it's like, well, if you don't do it, you're going to burn a lot of calories redoing stuff, baby. So like, come on. Anyways, I just wanted to highlight that because you guys were willing to kind of bite the bullet and just do that crosswalk with each other.
It's true. I mean, it's why you have this like very old, very cliche saying in software that if you're going to identify a missing requirement, it'll take you an hour to do it in implementation or in requirements gathering because you got to go back and edit the doc that everyone had signed off on. Oh no. But if you figure it out when you're midway through development, it's going to cost you 10 hours because you've already built a lot of things on some assumptions. And if you figure it out in testing when this is all baked and the code's locked, now you're at 100 hours and so on and so forth. Because that's before you've got any users on it that you're going to have to retrain.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then once you go into production, do the hours go back down? Now it's pretty easy to find it, or did they just keep going up? I'm pretty sure they keep going up, right?
They go from there. I don't think it's great.
Impacts, business outages, lawsuits, right? Like, oh my gosh. So it's like, now that, and again, that doesn't mean you need to know everything about every requirement. Again, we're talking the T-shaped approach, right? Like I know a little bit about everything so I can see the connections. And then I can have a frame of reference within which I can zoom in down that vertical part into the piece that I'm working on today. You're still going to miss stuff. There's still going to be problems. We're not getting rid of that, but we're just saying you won't have the same integration issues doing it that way. And I think that applies to learners as well, too. Let me give you a broad base of possibilities and capabilities. All right, now let's zoom into a particular application. Great. Do you feel solid on that? Great. Let's come back up. What's another realm that you could learn about? Oh, let's zoom in on that one. Versus trying to give it all to them all at once or only just the one piece that you think they need to know. And I think doing that iteratively and recursively is really how humans learn. And I mean, think about it. When we talk about training an AI model, what do? We tell them to recurse on a whole bunch of big data and information and twist and turn and contort it and then come back. And it's like, okay, now, it doesn't get fed in a linear fashion. It works in an iterative fashion. So, in that sense, AI and humans do learn in a similar way. They just are able to do it at gigawatts that we don't quite have.
I remember having a really nice example of this. I was working with a large national health plan, and we were so deep into this implementation, and it was so not going well, which is sort of my sweet spot in some ways. So
I'll be clear. Your sweet spot is helping them in that situation, not generating that situation. I don't want people to take that the wrong way. Yeah.
not hanging out in that spot for too long, but I do really enjoy the path out of the dirt for some
There is
reason.
a certain amount of invigoration that comes from those crises.
Mhm. Exactly. And I remember working with these folks, and I have no idea how much training they had or hadn't gotten at that point. It's a moot point. But I remember a spot where we were talking through, and I was sort of like, hey, like, do you guys want it to work this way or this way? And I thought I was so helpful by really boiling it down for them and just like on the UI, like red button or green button, just tell me what color you prefer there. And we started talking about it. And the more we talked about it, the more I found myself going back and saying, well, it's because we're architecting it this way. And it's because we defined that one concept back there that one way. And it was probably one of the more valuable conversations. It wasn't set up as a training, but the client sort of at some point said, oh, I had just assumed that you had built it out like this. And it was on something that I definitely would have thought is like, oh, well, that's like a behind the scenes thing. Like, no client needs to know how that table's designed. Like, that's nothing. That's our problem to deal with. But she found it so helpful because, kind of like me, she was a big ground up person. She wanted to understand how it was built. And once she felt after a few of those rounds, like she knew the foundation that we were standing on and she understood what was beneath her and she trusted it, we just got rolling on a whole other level than where we've been working.
That's great. Yep. It's always the assumptions you take for granted, right? That catch you. So being able to ask those curious questions. Tell us a little bit. So we talked about the generalist specialist, the T kind of model of getting a little bit of the best of both. What's another angle that you've learned over your career that helps people get the most out of the tools that they're implementing or acquiring?
I think the single biggest thing has been orienting around customer outcomes as the North Star. This has been a big mantra for us internally. Um, it is really easy to come in and think that because we did a sales process and we did some sleek demos and the customer clearly did a business case in order to be able to spend money on us, then great, let's go ahead and just get everything plugged in and buttoned up. And again, the most important thing is to like do it quickly, like check all the boxes, and then let's let the users get in there. And we found it just so important to continuously, constantly, iteratively revisit those outcomes and talk through them more. Even in the cases where most of my team and most of the client team is saying, hey, we don't need to do that again. We talked about it last month. Like, what could have possibly changed? We still found that the third or fourth time that we're reviewing, your business, your KPI that you're trying to drive is this, and it's the team that's going to be using it, and so on. Inevitably, someone makes a connection there that they didn't make the last couple times. The synapse fires just a little bit differently. And someone suddenly goes, oh, you know what other team we should really pull into this conversation? And, yes, that is how we've been thinking about it for 6 months. But hey, let me bring another thought forward. I was working with another customer. They were looking at it like this. I'm not asking you guys to change your mind, but for what it's worth, that's another option I wanted to bring
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah. But the catalyst for that question is asking, what is the customer outcome here? How is this going to improve or affect or benefit the customer? What has changed for the customer since we last checked about this that we might need to incorporate? But it's really keeping the spotlight on that customer avatar. And the examples that you and I are talking about here, you mentioned it, like, there's the health plan, there's the health providers, there's the regulatory agencies, there's the pharmacies, there's there's the community-based organization. So when we say customer, in most complex situations, there's more than one, right? But that doesn't mean that there's not a customer, right? It's like, for this particular provider you talked about, who's going to want to help to, use this in a clinical setting, this is more of a policy plan design customer. They're going to use it more in a strategic setting, but still just naming those customers, identifying and understanding those avatars, and then constantly come back to revisit their outcomes. I mean, it sounds so basic, but I think that, again, it's an assumption. We all think like, of course I know what they want, and then we find out that, they're evolving too. And so maybe what we thought, and then there's what they said they wanted, and then there's what they actually needed, which is often two entirely different things. So, but yeah, going back and asking that question to refocus it. And the worst thing that can happen is, right, we revalidate that we're still on the right track. Okay, well, that's not a loss. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Anna, I know you are terribly busy, and I really appreciate you being able to share some of the secret sauce in your ability to really connect the dots, tell the story, help people get the most out of their tools. Where can folks follow you, stay in touch with you, and just be aware of the cool things that you're up to?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn, Anna Basevich. Keep an eye on Arcadia there as well. We love putting out the cool stuff that our clients are doing, the interesting products that we're putting forward. So excited to see folks online.
Okay, that's excellent. I had one more question for you that I ask all of our guests. And I'll give you a minute. Don't feel like you got a rapid fire on it. If you want to digest for a second, that's okay. And it's one of those very open-ended. So I'm not asking you to describe the universe, just, focus on one dimension of it. But when you think on the successes that you've had, and you've seen the success of those around you, what's one dimension of being an unleashed leader for them? Like, what helped them unlock or break through or have that unleashed moment? What's one of those dimensions that you've seen that you'd like to shine a light on?
I would have to say getting passionate about the work and the outcome together. I think that it's really hard to feel like, you're putting in your 40, 50, 60, whatever it is, hour weeks, you're getting on a plane, whatever, because something's going to happen in a year, because that's when we're going to, that's when I'm going to get my raise. That's when I'm going to sell the company. That's when I'm going to go on vacation, whatever it is. It's tough to put up with work that you don't like. And it's really hard because I think there's a lot of early stage career advice out there, or there was for a while when I was coming out of college that was like, find your passion. And it's like, I'm 22. Like, my passion maybe has a little bit to do with tequila and like other things that I don't think are workplace
I
relevant.
want to make rent and I want to party on Friday night. Yeah.
Pretty much. But you do different work, you try different things. You will discover at some point that you're miserable and it's going to feel like you made the worst mistake getting into this and now like no one will ever take you again. And I when I was leaving my big consulting job, it was funny because like 90% of the people that I talked to were so supportive. And somebody at some point, sort of planted the seed in my head of like, it's going to look so bad on your resume. It's going to look like you couldn't hack it in this big role. And and like you had to like go back to like the smaller company with a tail between your legs thing. And I think my dad gave me the best feedback on this. And he said, look, like, you're not going to get your next job by mailing your resume out and people, you're going to get it because you worked with someone before who wants to work with you again. So, like, do the thing that you want to do, build the story that you want to build. And like, I think that just being in that spot where you genuinely enjoy the work and it's not every day, like you're going to have good days and bad days, but being in a spot where you're excited about the work, you're excited about why you're doing it. You're excited about the people you're doing it with. And every now and then one of those pieces will fall off the bus. You'll pick it back up later. You'll keep plowing through it. I think that's one of the most important things.
That was money, Anna. And you're absolutely right. It's like maybe that first job, yeah, you're doing the formal interview or the resumes, but to your point, yeah, and maybe they're doing a resume validation to be like, okay, have you actually done any of the stuff you said you did? But it's the relationships and being passionate about it. I also, when you talk about the passion, I think people speak of passion as if it's something out there, right? Like it's like you're going on this quest. I think of, have you ever read The Alchemist? Did you ever read that book? Right. It's like these, right. I mean, I try to read about every 5 years or so. We did it in a leadership book a couple of years ago and it was great. But it's like he leaves home to go find it and he does all this stuff and has all these great adventures and he comes back and the thing he was looking for was right freaking there. And I think to your point about that, the leaders you worked with earlier, you talked about, are leaders who helped tell the story so you could see the passion that was there. Because there's passion in just about anything you can be working on. And so I would say that, yes, it's finding the passion that's there. And if it's not there, making it there, right? Like, creating it and then building it. And then when you're realizing that it's not the kind of passion for you, then yeah, start looking for another place to get your passion. But it's not like it's a super esoteric, like, when you're at the Zen Buddha retreat, that's when you find it. I mean, I think you and I have found ways of finding that passion in a conference room, going through 168-page project plans, right? Like it's there, you can find it. And as a leader helping other people see it, I don't know. I just think that's cool. Sorry, I'm geeking off on you right now. I'm kind of, I'm a fan of Anna, so you can probably tell. I love the way you handle yourself in these conversations. Well, again, thank you again so much for being on the show. You're coming in at a great time. You have a massive swell of audience that's looking to hear this story. All right. Well, thank you again. And don't be a stranger.
Sounds like a plan. Take care, Lee.
Thank you for joining us today on the Unleashing Leaders podcast. Subscribe so you don't miss a moment that could be the key to your next breakthrough. Let's stay connected and contribute together by grabbing that @UnleashingLeaders handle on LinkedIn, YouTube, or your favorite network. This is Lee Scott. Keep learning, loving, and leading. Our future and our communities are counting on us.